delighted that we today have a wonderful panel. We have Adrian Davis, we have Excel Cohn, and we have Roy Pereira. All very kindly agreed to speak today. Adrian delivered a very insightful and exhilarating keynote 2 weeks ago on strategy and competitive advantage. And I am absolutely delighted to have him back today. Adrian, as you know, is an expert in sales and corporate strategy. Unlike traditional sales consultant and trainers, Adrian does not treat sales as a separate department, but rather a unifying corporate culture or way of life. His strength lies in aligning corporate strategy with customer-facing strategies to increase profitability. For over 20 years, he's been devoted to understanding and applying the principles of successful selling in business. In 2002, he founded Whetstone Incorporated, a dynamic sales, innovation, and business process consulting firm, specializing in helping chief executives build cohesive, client-driven organizations, resulting in greater value for their clients. Without further ado, please help me welcome Adrian Davis.
I'd like to speak to you today, hopefully that's good volume, yes, about becoming more influential. Specifically, when you sell, how many of you here are responsible for bringing in revenue for your companies? Right. Okay. And how many here are salespeople? This is where everybody's hands should go up, right? Because we're all in the business of selling ideas, selling ourselves, influencing others. But people have a negative concept of sales. And I think I know why. Salespeople have done this. The organization I worked for before I went out on my own, the VP of Worldwide Sales had a sales conference of about 400 people. He was addressing us as sales professionals. And he made a very direct statement to us. And it was this: sales is war. You need to get out there and you need to get those contracts signed, and you need to get them signed on your terms. Get out there and crush your customer. We were a Silicon Valley company, 400 educated people, and this was his instruction to the team. And I had to look around me to see, like, am I the only one in shock here? And I actually was. People were digesting this. And so these people go out into the marketplace, and they are driven by fear. Because salespeople have egos, they're afraid of failure. And this is a statistic from WOMA, the Word of Mouth Marketing Organization, that says the best salespeople outperform their peers by a ratio of 57 to 1. 57 to 1. So there are people in sales who are making millions of dollars a year, and the majority are scraping to get by. And that majority feels the pressure and the tension from their management team. And so they engage in dysfunctional practices when they are engaging with their customers and prospects. I want to talk today about 2 skills that are essential to effective influence. One is storytelling, and the other is the ability to be flexible and vary your message depending on who you're speaking to. So really the ability to engage different personalities. How many of you here are technical in the nature of your work is technical? Yeah. So many entrepreneurs are, in technology or engineers, and they have great products, and they get into the technology or the technical details of the product and they try to explain it to others. And this really is the worst thing they can do. The best thing they can do is simply tell stories. And so I want to give you a framework that you can use for storytelling. And then I want to give you another framework that you can use to modify your story depending on who you're speaking to. In terms of Q&A, I prefer if you just stop me as I go. So if you have a question as I go, I'd rather just engage rather than wait till the end. Most presentations end up like this. And the reason is, the presentation stack that you work together, you put your PowerPoint together, most people think it's unique. It's all the same. It starts out with, here's the history of our company, here's how long we've been in business, here's how many clients, everybody has the logo slide, here's all the clients we have, and then here's how great our product is. And it's just not engaging. And so I want to share with you this concept. Human beings are interested in stories. We're interested in the stories of each other. And all story, fundamentally, is about change. We start out in one condition, and we end up in another. And that's all story is. And that's what interests people. They want to understand, what was the path to go from point A to point B? And this is what we need to be very clear about as we present our stories. What people are buying from you, if they buy from you, is change. That's what they're buying. They want an improvement in their condition. So I'm in condition A. I will buy your product or your service if you can change my condition. So that's what people are buying. All purchases start with a current state. We call this the status quo. So wherever I am today, that's my status quo. I am not going to buy from you unless I have a desire for a better state. So your job is to convince me, well, first of all, make me aware that there is a better state, and then convince me that I should be in that state, that I can be and I should be. There's a state in the middle, from current state to future state, that we call the transition state. And this fundamentally is what you are selling. I'm buying the future state, but you're selling the transition state. And unless the threat to get out of the current state and or the desire to go into the future state is greater than the cost of the transition state, there will be no transaction. So I've got to see that whatever it is you're selling, this transition state is full of risk. It's full of uncertainty. There's a cost associated with it, not just financial. So the future state, the benefit of the future state must be greater than that cost. And that's really the essence of effective selling. The problem is, the change that you're selling is not the only change that I'm undergoing or entertaining. We are awash in change. And what happens when people are overwhelmed by change, so there's all kinds of changes taking place at work, there's all kinds of change taking place in personal lives. When people are overwhelmed, they freeze and they do nothing. And so even though what you're proposing to me might make all the sense in the world, I still may do nothing, simply because I'm overwhelmed. So part of the skill set that we require is to, in the mind of the buyer, ensure that the transition that we are proposing is prioritized, that it's seen as far more important than all of the other changes that are being proposed or being entertained. If we can do that, the buyer will act on it. That requires what I call emotional agitation. No decision is made unless there's emotional agitation to drive the decision. So said another way, let's say it like this. Logic is about thinking. It's about analysis. It's not about deciding. So if you present logic to me, I can analyze that all day long. I'm not going to do anything. Emotion is what makes people move. Emotion is what makes people act. And what the neuroscientists are showing us now, because now they can actually scan the human mind in real time while it's making decisions, what they're showing us now is that all emotion is rooted in goals. It's because we have goals that we have emotion. That when I want something, that first of all is desire, but also the risk of not getting it triggers fear. So all emotions can be categorized as either positive or negative in the context of goals. When you see someone light up positive with positive emotions, it means that something is moving them toward their goals. When you see somebody light up with negative emotions, it means something is frustrating them toward their goals. So in terms of influence, what you need to do is understand what are the goals of your buyer. What is it that they're really trying to achieve? And then show how your value proposition can help them move toward the achievement of that goal. If you do that, you will trigger positive emotion. Okay. Alternatively, if the current state is moving them away from their goals, then they will have agitation and negative emotion towards the current state. And this is what you need to get movement. You need to make sure that people are agitated about the current state and they're desiring the future state. And that combination of emotion is what drives them to make a decision. So the analysis, the logic that you want to present is only relevant after they are emotionally engaged. Does that make sense? Okay. So we want to make sure that they're emotionally engaged first, and then we'll present the logic, because then they want the logic. They want the logic to justify the action that they want to take. But if you present the logic first, it really goes in one ear and out the other. So first there must be a magnet for the logic, and that magnet is emotional agitation. This formula, I call this formula the secret to life. So feel free to write it down. This is really the key to all influence. And it says this: action is a function of belief. In other words, everything I do because of the paradigm or the belief set that I have. If you want me to behave differently, you can force me, right? If you have authority over me, you can force me. But if you don't have authority over me, you have to influence me. And the way to influence me is to influence my beliefs. If you change my beliefs, then my action will change. So I don't buy anything from you today. I have a certain course of action. You want to change that. You want me to buy from you. So what you must do first is change my beliefs. Beliefs are stored in the mind in the same place as memories. And in a way, they are a superset of memories. And memories are formed through experiences. But we can also have virtual experiences, and that's the power of storytelling. When you tell stories, you're giving someone a virtual experience. And the mind cannot really tell the difference between a virtual experience and a real experience. They both get stored as memories. And beliefs are founded on memories. So, you see this wonderful image here. Most children this age do not sit still. Would you agree? Yeah. And here, if you have children or nephews or nieces, grandchildren in some cases, here you've got this classroom full of kids in rapt attention. Why? Because someone is telling them a story. And from the earliest age until we die, we are engaged by story. There's something about story which catches our attention and holds it. Why would that be? Because story is related to survival. Story is how we unpack meaning. The elders pass on meaning through story. Whether it's Little Red Riding Hood or the Three Little Pigs, we tell our children these stories because there's meaning packed inside. And so we're able to engage the mind, give them an experience, and at the same time insert meaning with the story. It's involuntary. When someone starts to tell us a story, we engage because we navigate our lives with story. Basically, we are a database of stories. And whenever we face a new circumstance, what we do is we reach into this database to see have we faced this before? And if we have, what happened? And if what happened was good, then we know what to do. If what happened was bad, then we're going to try something else. And so we have this insatiable appetite for story. Story has the same structure as change, because story must be about change. So just as we said with change, we start with current state, we have transition state, and we have a future state. With story, we have beginning, middle, and end. Beginning, middle, and end. The beginning is the setup. The middle must be the conflict. No conflict, no story. So if you went to the movies and you pay your, what is it now, $16, $18, something like that, and you sit down and they say, you know, this businessman got up in the morning, he had a cup of coffee, he read the paper, he showered, he got dressed, he got in his car, he went to work, he had a good day, then he came home, he had dinner with the family, and then he went to bed. You would be furious. There's no story there. Okay? Story happens when there's conflict, when something goes wrong, and we need to know what's the resolution here? So the essence of story is conflict. We need to use this in sales, using something that I call the hero's journey. When we use the hero's journey, it allows you to brag about your capabilities without seeming like a braggart. It allows you to showcase your clients and at the same time showcase yourself. The hero's journey has 5 steps. The first step is to introduce the hero. And this might be difficult. In fact, it is. When I train organizations on this, this is the first challenge. They fall at the first hurdle. Because everybody wants to be the hero. So let me tell you how great my company is and how long we've been around. And that's not it. The hero is never you. The hero is your customer. If you really are doing something valuable, then you are changing lives. You are impacting the lives of others. Find someone that you have really changed their life. Now, the key to introducing the hero is he or she must be a person. A lot of times we talk about companies. Companies are impersonal. So when you talk about a company, you're not really engaging the heart. You need to talk about another human being. Human beings are interested in other human beings. Especially, and write this down, if they are similar in role, and most importantly, goal. They must be similar in role and goal. Role, because again, we're storing a database of stories. And if I am, let's say I'm a director of IT, and you're going to tell me the story about a retail store clerk, I don't care. But if I'm a director of IT and you're going to tell me the story of another director of IT, you've got my attention. Because what happened to him or her could happen to me. So I'm going to listen to that story. I say similar in goal because this is the clincher. If I am a director of IT and I'm trying to make a more secure organization, and you tell me the story of another director of IT that was also trying to make a more secure organization, you've got my full engagement. Because I'm trying to do this, I'm emotionally engaged in this, they're trying to do the same thing. So similar in role and goal. Second, there must be a villain. Something has to go wrong. You have to pit the hero against somebody or something. The hero must be a person. The villain can be a person, place, or thing. But it's something that enters into the hero's life and causes turmoil. Okay? As a result of the villain entering the hero's life, the hero falls. The hero gets into trouble. Until he or she acquires a new resource. That new resource is where you come in. This is where you introduce your company. So they now are introduced to you. This is sort of the dragon, and this is the sword. So you give the sword to the hero, and now the hero has renewed strength, and he can overcome the dragon and become triumphant. But the story fundamentally must be about transformation. As a result of this struggle, the hero or the hero's environment is transformed. Does this make sense? Any questions? Yes.
What if you're selling something that's never been introduced in the market?
Okay. Then you're in trouble, my friend. So what if you're selling something that's never been introduced in the market? Then obviously, this is a big risk. Okay? You're not going to have proof points to say, we've done this. But there has to be something in terms that I can believe in. So maybe it's the management team, and you're able to tell me the story of, this is called the story of origin. Okay, so this is the hero's journey. And we use this as proof that we can help you, because we've helped others. If you haven't done this, then you as the entrepreneur or your management team must have capabilities and passion around what you're doing. So rather than believing in the product or service that you're bringing to market, I have to believe in you. And so you need to have a very strong track record and a real passion for what you're doing. And we call this, then, you have to tell your story of origin. Why you? Why are you doing this thing? And if you can get me to believe authentically that you have a real passion for this and capability for it, there are certain people that will take a risk with you. Not everybody, but there are certain people that will believe in you and take a risk. Other questions? I'll give you a quick example. You don't have to be long here. This can be this could be a 60-second story. It could be a 2-minute story. It could be a 10-minute story. You're going to gauge it based on who you're talking to. But if I were, let's say, selling sales training, and you're all sales professionals, I would tell you the story of a gentleman called Jeff. Young man working for an IT company out west. And the company was doing quite well. He was hired on because of his work ethic. Very strong work ethic. And that's what they were looking for in their recruit. So they hired him. He was doing okay. But the company changed the game. Now they wanted to sell to CEOs. They were selling to fairly large companies, some of the largest companies in Canada, and they wanted to sell at the C-level. He struggled. They brought me in to train the organization. And when I trained the organization, at the break, he called me aside. And he said to me, Adrian, I can't do this. And I said, Jeff, why not? He said, I don't have an education. I didn't finish school, and I don't have the vocabulary to talk to CEOs. And so I reassured him that he didn't need a great vocabulary because it wasn't about him, it was about the chief executive. And what he really needed was great questions and stories. We worked together for about 18 months. And over that time, his confidence grew. His manager really believed in him. Because if it was another manager, perhaps they would have let him go. But they believed in his character. And he worked with him. Over time, he finally grasped it, mastered it. Today, he is a sales manager. In fact, I just went back and visited the organization. When I met them, they were 10 people. Today, they're 30, and Jeff is one of the sales managers. He said to me he's bought a boat, he's building a cottage, he's making money now. And this is somebody who said, I don't have the education to talk to CEOs. And now he's confident, he's actually a leader. So there's an example of just telling a simple story, which people who, if someone is similar in role and similar in goal, they will listen to that story. And I can embellish it. I could really, take them to the edge of the seat. What's powerful about this is the listener has no choice. They go along for the ride. When you pick someone who's similar in role and goal, the subconscious mind engages and goes on the journey in a virtual way. So it's like they climb into the skin of the hero. And whatever emotions the hero experiences, they experience it. And that reconfigures their belief system, and it enables them to purchase your product vicariously. So whatever the hero experienced, they experienced that vicariously, and in a sense you've opened up the pathway in the brain to actually utilize your service. So they have bought your service without buying it, and they've experienced the triumph that the hero experienced. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now, the second skill set is varying your message based on who you're speaking to. And that comes down to this, what is value? When we're telling our story, we're trying to portray our value. But value is not what we define. Value is what is perceived by the buyer. And so we need an understanding of who we're selling to. And the best system that I've seen on the market is by this lady called Sherry Tree, who's designed this system called Bank, which is a system of understanding personalities, specifically buyers. So there's many personality, I think everybody's probably done a personality assessment system. This is one designed specifically for buyers. She calls it Bank, and enables you to really crack the code of each personality. And I'll explain this. The notion that there are 4 personality types is not new. It goes back to 460 BC, the Hippocrates. And then for thousands of years, people have understood that fundamentally there are 4 personality types. Because there are 4 quadrants in the brain. And the brain, each quadrant processes information differently and expresses information differently. What's different about Bank is that it is designed specifically for how people buy. How do the 4 personality types express themselves when they are buying? And what information are they looking for when they are buying? And how should sales professionals engage them when they are buying? Tony Robbins said, let your prospect determine your presentation. So if you go into any organization and you say, can I see your sales presentation? You'll see one presentation. And they'll take that one presentation and present it to everybody. What we should see are 4 presentations. Depending on who we're talking to, which version of the presentation should we present? And the same with marketing, all the marketing material as well. The problem, if you only have one presentation, it means 25% of the time you're speaking to someone who speaks your language. 75% of the time, you're missing. 75% of the time, you're speaking a language that other people don't appreciate. And this is why you see so many sales professionals miss the mark, because their message, their value is not being digested. So we need to understand who is it that we're speaking to. It'd be like if I speak English and 75% of the people in the audience do not. My message is only resonating with 25%. Let me give you an example. I'll just show you this. And this is part of the Bank system. So, Lalita, I'm going to pick on you, and I'm going to ask you to look at these cards and sort them in order, most like you to least like you. And while he's doing that, I'll explain these quadrants of the brain. You have, everybody knows left brain, right brain? Okay. The left brain has upper and lower quadrants. The right brain has upper and lower quadrants. As we're growing up, we begin to rely on one of these quadrants more than the others. And it becomes dominant in the way we think. It's like the brain, that quadrant would have highways to transfer thoughts. So you've got the 407, the 401, and the DBP on a good day, right? That's in that quadrant. In the other quadrants, it's like city driving, maybe 60 kilometers an hour, 40 kilometers an hour. And then there's another quadrant where it might be country roads, where you really have to slow down because it's bumpy and it's not well paved. That's the way the mind works. That there will be one quadrant that is our dominant way of thinking, and we can think very strongly, very quickly in that quadrant. There'll be another quadrant that we hardly use, or we prefer not to use. And that's why when you're speaking, when you're presenting, if you're presenting based on your strength, but it is your listener's weakness, it actually becomes annoying to them to process your information. So you need to be able to understand, how does your buyer prefer to process information? And how can you articulate your message in such a way that it's readily digestible for them?
I'm too close to call, but
Okay.
if I'm pushed, okay.
This one, okay. And then this one next, and then this one next.
And this one.
Okay.
The
Okay. So what Luis has just done is given me his bank code. You know when you go to an ATM machine and you put in a 4-digit code, and then that releases the funds? Luis has shared with me in 60, 90 seconds how his brain is wired. Which quadrant processes information first, and which quadrant processes information last. So the first one is A. It stands for action. It means that he's an ideas person. He likes to think, he's very creative, and when he has a good idea, he wants to act on it. A lot of entrepreneurs have this as their dominant strength. Next, he has what's called nurturing. This is all about relationships. Okay? He really values relationships, values teamwork. Great for people who have to coordinate an association like this. Next is called knowledge. It's the scientific mind. Really values learning. And the last we call blueprint. And this is more of a structured way of doing things, very predictable, very stable. This is his last. So the code says this. Lalit likes vision. So if I were selling to Lalit, I would speak at a visionary level, sell him on the concept, the ideas. But it's modified by relationships. So you have to understand how the big idea engages the team and keeps everybody together. This code tells me what to avoid. This is the quadrant of the brain that is least likely to fire. And if he has to use it, it's kind of aggravating. So anything that's very predictable, very structured, very step-by-step, he will find it constraining. So how did I do? Okay? So go ahead.
So when I go and meet someone, how do I decipher that? Like, I'm not going to give him these cards.
Actually, you would. And that's the value of the system. So first of all, salespeople for years have clues. So the way people are, they have clues, how they dress, how they speak, etc. So you can look for these clues. But also what we train with the bank system is just to say to somebody, and nobody has turned this down, because people are curious about themselves. So you simply say to them, we're going to be working together for a while. In order for me to be the most service to you and the most value to you, and to shorten the time that we have to take together, could you take a look at these 4 cards and just sort them in order, most likely to least likely. Everybody does it. And once they've done it, you've got the code. So instead of guessing, just ask them. And it's not about manipulation, it's about service. Once I understand Lalit's code, I'm able to communicate with him much more effectively than not knowing it. And I can share with him my code, and he'll be able to communicate with me much more effectively.
But to begin with, I'm suspicious that you're going to force me to do something that you don't want to do. Because sales is all about, say, you go into a used car lot, like that's
Yes.
a very common example.
Yes. And this is where, it's down to your personal credibility and your attention. It's all about relationships now. It's all about trust and relationships and how you comport yourself. So if we are engaged in a conversation, there's a way that I'm going to conduct myself that you're going to see very clearly what my intentions are. I ask you to go ahead and sort these cards. If you choose not to do that, you can just rely on detecting clues, because there are clues. But why not just ask?
Okay.
And just, if you have a transparent manner, people will engage with you similarly.
Question.
Yes.
Based on if you don't know their communication style, then you could always ask them a few questions about their to immediately determine their values. Like the thing is, when, for example, if someone had a retail operation and they have constant clients coming in, you obviously can't be passing up the
Yes.
cards. You can tell basically by their demeanor
Yes.
when you first go up to them and say, "Can I help you?" Just their reaction to that, you can pretty much tell their body language, how they communicate. If they say, "Hey, how you doing?" They start to, then they're amiable, and they.
Absolutely.
So the big thing that I found from this is that if you go in and start telling them the spiel, you may not be approaching it the right way.
Exactly.
So it's like, what do you look for in that lawnmower? Or what are you looking for today? Or,
Exactly.
So that's maybe a tip for.
Yeah, so we're encouraging sales professionals to just be transparent and just say, I'd like to understand how you think, how you think, just take a look at these cards. In certain situations, you just can't, it's not practical, and there are clues. And I'll talk about that. So the blueprint. So when you think of blueprint, what profession do you think of? Architects, engineers, people who stay inside the lines. When blueprints greet you, they will greet you very formally. So it'll be a very firm handshake. So if I'm greeting somebody and say, "Great to meet you," okay, and they give me a nice solid handshake, if they're dressed very formally, tend to be very constrained, they don't take up a lot of space, they don't speak very loudly, I'm probably dealing with a blueprint. Action, very different, okay? Action is high five or the fist bump, right? Lots of personality. And you'll see that they're very extroverted, very passionate, very fast moving. Nurturing is a hug, right? These are people who want to connect to other people. And then knowledge, well, people who have the knowledge temperament, they don't like to be touched at all. So we like to give them the Star Trek salute, right? Here you just want to acknowledge their intelligence and communicate with them telepathically. But the different values, that underlying each of these are values. Blueprint, stability, structure, processes, predictability, responsibility, duty. If you violate these values, they're going to disengage from you. So it's really critical to understand the underlying values behind each of these styles. The action, freedom, flexibility, spontaneity, this is what they value. Nurturing, they value relationships, authenticity, personal growth. And knowledge, I mentioned learning, intelligence, logic. So there are 12 values behind each of these styles. We need to speak to those values. And so as you're telling your story, what you would do is in the climb out of the gutter, so the hero falls into the gutter, coming out of the gutter, you would modify the story depending on who you're speaking to. So quickly, in terms of, and just to give you an example, in fact, a gentleman called Jeff Logan runs a boutique financial services company. Has done quite well, but he knew that there's a certain personality style he could not connect with. And whenever he would come across that style, he would basically give up. He'd realize it's not going to work. He put it down to chemistry, personal chemistry. He was in our training, and we taught him about the knowledge personality style. And he recognized this is the style that he does not click with. As he was in the training, he excused himself and he sent 2 prospects an email because he recognized how to deal with knowledge. People who have the knowledge temperament, they love information. And when you give them tons of information, they actually read it all. They analyze it. And they'll come back with questions. So he just loaded them up with all the information, the prospectus, everything. A few weeks later, the gentleman wrote back and said, "I've gone through all the material. I just have a couple of questions." He ended up transferring $3 million of investments over to him. And Jeff was just blown away. He said he couldn't believe it, that these people, they're very low-key, but they have huge investment portfolio. And the people that he gets along with, he's an action type. He says they're very flashy, very decisive, but they're not as wealthy as this knowledge type. He made $50,000 in that single, $50,000 per year commission on that single transaction. If I was telling the same story about a nurturing type, I would tell the same story about Jeff, but I wouldn't talk about the $50,000. In fact, it was two transactions, 150, 130, 80,000. I wouldn't talk about that. I would talk about his daughter. That when he learned this system, he asked the family to do the assessment. And he learned that his daughter was a blueprint. He's in action. And his daughter and him were always butting heads. She's 16, and she's always wanting to go out, and he's always saying she can't, and they were butting heads. When he realized she was a blueprint, he simply said to her, okay, you can go out on Saturday nights. 2 rules. You're not going out with a boy by yourself, you can go as a group. And number 2, you're home by 11:30. He said she just lit up. She just lit up. Because now she could plan her life. And he said he's received more hugs from her in the past few weeks than he has in the last few years. Just understanding the personality type. So with a nurturing type, they wouldn't go for the money. That's not what's important to them. It's the relationships. Same story, you're just going to emphasize something different depending on who you're talking to. So this bank system, it's available. If you're interested, you can ask me about it. But it's a whole home study course that you can take that will take you through everything and show you how to recognize the different styles, how to communicate the different styles, and how to express your message for the different styles. Okay. Question?
A quick question on that story, and I think that's really good. I really like that. The question I have is, could you possibly inject the hero, introducing the hero into pretty much any portion of that story, depending on who the decision maker is that you're speaking to?
Yes, if I understand the question correctly, who is the hero may change depending on who you're speaking to. So I may tell the story, for example, of a sales professional like Jeff, or I might tell the story of the VP of sales, same organization, or the VP of HR or manufacturing, because everybody wins when we do an intervention. And so depending on who I'm speaking to, I may pick a different hero to demonstrate a different dimension of the story. Is that what you mean?
Kind of, but the second part is you could essentially introduce the hero and start with the transformation and then move through it. It's kind of almost like a cycle. You could start with like the, I changed Jeff's life. Here's Jeff.
Oh, I see.
I changed his life and he's enjoying work. And this
Yes.
is what it is. So depending on who you're communicating and the importance of, I call it a cycle, and you can get in on any stage.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so how you present the story, where you start.
Right.
Because you might watch a movie and it starts in the middle,
Right.
right? And then it backs up to show you how it got there. So yes, absolutely. You can start with the transformation, capture their attention, and then go back and walk your way through it. Yeah. Other questions?
In investment industry, it is the portfolio manager who decides to buy the report, research report. But he doesn't make decision, somebody gives him the input, his assistant. So the problem people face when they try to contact this assistant doesn't take another person seriously unless the guy who is contacting the assistant have a better qualification than him, or he is attached with a very well-reputed company. And another time, assistant is under threat because if boss sees that this outsider salesman has a better knowledge about that particular industry, he feels threatened. So how can somebody convince the assistant just to have a meeting, so that just to present that which can be open something? So how can we do that unless we don't have a stamp of MBA from Harvard or attached to the RBC Dominion Securities?
So if I hear the question correctly, it sounds like the assistant is a blueprint personality because they respect credentials, they respect title. Okay? So you need to relate to them on that level, and you really need to relate to the assistant as if they were the decision maker. And so you engage the assistant respectfully as a decision maker, basically selling them on the concept of the value of you meeting with whoever it is that you're trying to meet with. So that's an actual sales challenge that you have, dealing with the assistant and understanding the personality style and the thinking style of the assistant and engaging that person. Okay, let me.
In sales situations, you mentioned it in the starting, is that you get to a state where the buyer is willing to buy something,
Yes.
right? But most situations, when you're doing service businesses, you are in a state where the buyer is in a state of, like sort of harmony. Or he doesn't realize that he has a need.
Right.
So
Yes.
you've got to be able to, like your hero story is good.
Yes.
I suppose you have to like paste it a little bit more and then try and create that state of uneasiness for them.
Very good. Very good. So I didn't go into it here,
Yeah.
but buying is a process.
Yes.
Okay. And I touched on it. The first step of buying is awareness. There must be awareness of a gap between where they are and where they could be. And that gap must be agitating, emotional. Once you have that, then you have a buying process. And the second step of the buying process is assessment. So once I know there's a gap, then I have to assess what's the best way to fill this gap. Awareness is emotional, assessment is logical. But the logic is powered by the emotion that's driven in the awareness phase. And that's where you really need skill in making sure that that emotion is full. Because it's the emotion that drives the rest of the journey. The next step is assessment, is logic. Then there's apprehension. Once they have chosen you, so during the assessment phase, they're looking for all the good that you have. They're trying to convince themselves that you're a good decision. Once they convince themselves of that, they move to the apprehension phase, where now they're concerned about all the things that are wrong. Okay, so now they begin to focus on your flaws, and they worry about going forward. This is really what we call the risk mitigation phase. So they need to understand the risk of choosing you, and they need to have a strategy for mitigating that risk. Once they figure that out, then they're ready to take action. So now they'll buy. And then the final stage is adoption, where they actually now integrate what you've sold them into their daily life. So that's the buying process. Awareness is the key. As you said, they must become aware of the gap in the status quo, or the insufficiency of the status quo, the inadequacy of the status quo. That must be emotionally agitating, and that drives the rest of the process.
So it's called the burning platform.
Yes, yes. So there must be that burning platform to get off the current state, but there also has to be a desire for the future state. And then again, depending on the personality style, what agitates one style is not necessarily what's going to agitate another. Okay.
Any more questions?
Yes.
So let's say I'm an entrepreneur starting a company and I'm actually looking to hire some people. Are they dominant in certain category and least dominant in certain category? How do you recognize this?
It really depends on industry. So certain industries, certain types of personalities will do far better than others. But across the board, what I would say today, what I would look for in a salesperson, number one is curiosity. If they're not naturally curious, you can't teach curiosity. I should have said number one, integrity. Number two, curiosity. And then number three, they've got to have passion. They've got to be hungry. They've got to really want this. Because sales is psychologically tough. And if you're not passionate, you won't have the staying power. So I would look for that. But in terms of personality styles, I've seen all the different styles successful, depending on the company, the industry, etc. Generally speaking, though, the action and the blueprint generally are more successful in sales than the nurturing and the nurturing and the knowledge. Nurturing generally, if they don't want to upset people, So the minute there's any hint of trouble, they'll back off. And the knowledge, they just want to think. They want to learn. They're not necessarily going to drive the decision. But knowledge in engineering or architect field would do really well. Nurture in health sciences would do really well. Okay, let me just finish here. I'll just say Adrian at adriandavis.com. If you do want, I didn't go into a lot of detail on the bank system. If you want more information on that, I'll share that with you. Also, I have templates for storytelling with some examples. And so if you'd like that, I'd be happy to share that with you as well. Thank you very much for your time.